Hey, what do you say we go here on a Tuesday podcast as the boys have left the building? Well, at least the studio. Al has entered the building. What's up, man?
Oh, good morning there, Jerry. So we talked a lot on the show today. It came up. I guess there was a bit of a disagreement between BT and Sal and their show, and it got me thinking about the old Mike and the Mad Dogs. So
Sure.
they would have their arguments. I really don't recall a Boomer and Carton
Never.
argument that was like legitimately where they were legitimately annoyed with each other. I really don't recall a
I don't either.
single time of that happening.
No, not until Craig's issue. There was never, and I remember when that whole thing happened and it became apparent that while they were going to be trying people out from time to time, that I was going to be doing the bulk of the work until they made a decision. I remember him saying to me, "Hey, whatever happens between now and 10, we're doing a show. Have fun, let it fly, and we get out of here. We go back to being, we're good." And my guess would be that was probably something that he and Craig talked about too. So
Yeah.
I give Boomer a ton of credit for that, to be quite honest.
Oh yeah, it's very difficult to. I mean, I flip out on. I'm only doing an hour,
And that's
right?
true.
Where
That is true.
get into a screaming thing. Screamed at CeeLo.
Sure.
We've had our arguments,
Mm-hmm.
so I can imagine doing 4 hours every day with somebody.
It's tough. It's a long time.
Yeah,
Long time.
I was thinking about that. Like, just think of like relationships that you have in your life, right?
Mhm.
That you've got to balance. You got to balance your work relationship with people that you're working closely with. You got to balance your relationship with your wife or husband or whoever. You got to balance your relationship with your kids,
Yep.
relationship with the people you live near, your neighbor. Man, it is a tricky
It's a lot going on.
when everything's humming along nicely.
It's fine.
Do you ever sometimes think like
Al's got it right.
no, I'm saying, do you ever have times where you go, I gotta say, right now, everything seems to be humming along nicely. Like, do you catch yourself when everything is harmonious and say, this is
So,
pretty good?
I'm not by any stretch making light of this at
Yeah.
all. I would say not since prior to March of 2020, and there's nothing to do with the pandemic. I would say my wife and I and our families had hummed along for quite a long time without any incident, any issue, any sadness or death in the family. And I don't mean distant cousins, or I mean like immediate family. And when my son had which I've spoken about at this point, when my son had the seizure and then wound up having to have his skull cut open to have a tumor removed. From that point, when that happened, which was during a show, it was one of the first shows I was home when it happened at around 9:30 in the morning. From that moment to I would say right now, I would say I don't think things have hummed along since then. There's been a lot that's gone on.
Yeah.
Lost my father-in-law in that time. My dad almost died twice. There have been several issues that have happened health-wise in my family, which so far we've gotten through them. So I would tell you that yes, as of March 1st, 2020, things were humming along for quite a long time, really well. And since mid-March of 2020, things have not been the same, and they have been quite dicey.
So then, even when those things eventually settle,
Mm-hmm.
will it always be in your head like,
Always,
yeah, see,
always.
yeah,
Always. Like I don't have, there I don't think there's a day that goes by that while, the doctors have cleared my son of everything. Um, how do I know something else isn't going to grow? You don't know. You have no idea. So
don't know, yeah.
the good news is he still has scans every year. Just had another one recently, which I believe came back clean. So it's all good. But every time you go, you don't know. So no, I would say I think when you get scarred by something or you experience something, it's very difficult to get that out of your mind as if it's not going to happen again to either that person or yourself or someone else relatively close to you.
Does it
So,
make you pessimistic?
no, it makes me more. I really do believe, a lot of the quotes have been funny and fun and light. I will tell you that I've had enough things that have happened to where I have sat back and said, the hell with waiting until next month, next year. And a lot of, I know they have fun with the comments about death and dying and all that. The whole point of that for me is more inspirational from the standpoint of don't get your ass caught in neutral because next month might not happen. Like if you want to do things, I'm not saying to be reckless and you're not going to go take out $100,000 loan to go sail around the world to say you did it. I'm not saying that. But if you've got the means or you're close to having the means to doing things you want to do them because, I certainly didn't expect my father-in-law to go and he did. He was in good shape. Never expected that. When my dad had a fall and I don't know if they gave him his last rites, but I mean, there was a night where we were told to essentially say goodbye because he wasn't going to make the night. Somehow he pulled through. But when he fell and got no one saw that coming. And so it's just little things like that, my mentality has completely changed from save, plan, think to just do it. Just go live your life. And whatever happens, at least at the end of the day or at the end of time or your time, you can look back and say, I got no regrets. I did everything I wanted to do. So I think that I would say my thoughts on life really took a hard turn right. I was already veering in that direction. I took a hard turn right 5 years ago for sure. And I think positively, personally. I don't think anything of what I say is negative. It's just to me an awareness. That's all. I think I live my life very happy. I smile. Believe it or not, most people actually think I'm a nice guy. I was friendliest of my senior class.
That's true. You have that.
And so how many people I meet, they're like, wow, you're not, boy, the way they talk about you, I'm like, yeah, I'm aware.
Expect you to be crazy
they
when you
think
meet
I'm
them.
a jerk off.
Get out, loser.
I'm like, guys, I'm just me.
Yeah.
So I met a great guy yesterday. I played golf with my son. Couldn't have been nicer. And at the end, he's like, it was a pleasure to meet you. You guys are great. I'm like, thank you. Very nice meeting you too. And I think when he came up to play with, I don't know if he was a little, play with him. It was great. We had a good time. He was a nice man.
Yeah.
It was all good.
I kind of get that reset sometimes when I'm driving into work. Like that's the only time I think of life as being fragile.
Sure.
But I think of it every day when I'm driving in, mainly at night. I don't think of it as much driving home.
Mm-hmm.
And it must be because of my fear of hitting a deer.
Understood.
Like I have that fear, so I just expect a deer to come out at any moment.
Yeah.
And as I'm driving along, I'll sometimes think like, everything's going along pretty good. All it takes is one jackass deer.
Or one jackass drunk driver, guy falls asleep, guy doesn't see you, anything.
Yeah. Or my wheel falls off.
Yeah. You ever think about that?
70 and my wheel just comes off.
Well, and that sounds funny, but did you ever think that sometimes, let's say, like I've had times where I've hit the brake and let's say my wallet, which was on the seat or the water goes flying to the front or my phone or whatever. And I'd be like, oh, there's nobody around me. Let me just lean down and grab it real quick. Well, in that moment, if you hit a pothole or your tire explodes or blows out and you don't have your hands who knows what could happen. So yeah, 100% at any moment.
Yeah. So I feel like I get that reset every day.
Do you feel like you've done anything about it though?
No.
Oh.
You mean like change my behavior?
Yeah.
No, other than I feel like I'm a very alert driver.
Okay.
I really do feel like I'm a very alert driver.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. I'm trying to play that balancing act in my life of like I'm trying to play the balancing act of save money, don't spend money. But then if you get in a car accident, you might not be able to enjoy the money you've saved, or that's what I think about.
I'm a spender. I have always been a spender.
Yeah.
I probably am more now than I ever was. Part of it is in the back of my head. I know I am being here almost 30 years. I am fully vested in my pension. I have been told that our pension is phenomenal. So like in the back of my mind, I know that there's money coming in. They've been telling us for 100 years, Social Security won't be there. It'll be there. I'm not worried about that. There'll be money coming in there. We've got a few investments, plus our home has great equity. So like in my mind, the idea of saving for retirement, no, I'm good. Like will I be wealthy in retirement? No, but I'm going to be broke? Absolutely not. Not even remotely broke. So I saw one guy say something about people that sit there and how did he put it? Because there are people that fantasize about reaching 65 or 66 or 67 to say, I made it and I retired. He goes, the problem with that is most people that reach 67 have so many physical ailments with them, they can't enjoy a goddamn thing anyway. So What was the point? Like all your good years are your 40s and 50s go enjoy them before you're in your 60s and things start happening.
Yes, that is the balance I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Trying to find that balance. Because then you get to a point where you're like, like I always say, oh, I want to go to Australia.
Go.
Because when am I going to go when I'm like 70?
Like I would say, and I've only known you for the last since '07, basically. So 18 years I've known 18. Yeah, 18 years. But yet I would tell you at 55, you are in the best shape I've ever seen you in. And you've been in good shape before, don't get me wrong. But I know the way you eat. You've maintained your weight. You've even lost a few pounds, which is remarkable. I didn't realize that skeletons could lose weight.
Yeah, lost a couple
I'm
skeletal.
kidding. Well, kidding aside, like you are in the best shape of your life right now. Why not plan Australia next summer? I mean, I would go this summer personally, but why not go? You're going to Montana this year. Why not start planning that next summer?
Yeah.
2 weeks off instead of going every other week off like you did last summer. Why not take a solid 2 or even 2.5 weeks? Like hell, Eddie did it during the holidays. Take 2.5 to 3 weeks off and go do a 14-day trip in Australia. You got plenty of time on the front end, plenty of time on the back end to relax, get your sea legs back and be back and refreshed.
Yeah. I don't know really what I think is in Australia. It seems like a place I want to go to.
I'm with you. There's not many
Right?
places overseas I want to go. That's one.
But like, what am I doing? And they'd be like, oh, what are you going to do in Australia? But I have no idea.
This coming from a guy who just booked a trip to Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah.
I think you will find a lot of things to do in Australia.
Yeah, I guess you got to figure out where in Australia, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Sydney, or what's the other place?
That's all I got.
There's definitely another place
Melbourne.
you've heard of. Yeah.
Melbourne.
Melbourne. I think Sydney is the place.
Yeah. I think they've got beautiful beaches. I mean, I don't know. I've never been there.
Probably go box a kangaroo. I
There
think
you go.
kangaroos will fight you if you want.
I think you would do well.
I hope so.
Box a kangaroo.
Yeah, but just box a kangaroo.
Understood, man.
The other thing I had on my list for today was more radio station related.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you think, because we listened to the overnight fella, we listened to Anthony Gallo, who was filling in for McMonagle. Now, when I hear McMonagle on, I hear the same callers over and over again. Unfortunately for Gallo, he didn't even get the same callers over and over again.
He
was getting
none for 90
zero
minutes.
callers.
Yeah.
Do you think that, there are people that just don't talk on the phone anymore, right?
I'm one of them.
Yeah, like you would prefer a text, like
Absolutely.
You text me, I'll text you, text me. Otherwise, sometimes you get stuck on the phone, man. It's like, what do we?
For sure.
I got things. I don't know what I have to do, but I feel like
I
feel like I gotta have something to do.
Yeah.
So it's tough. So I wonder, like, is sports radio suffering from lack of callers? Not lack of listeners, lack of callers to the station, from either people that just don't even think to make a phone call, or they're listening on the Odyssey app and they're going back, so they're not listening live, or they're going back to the podcast and listening. I don't know. I wonder, like, do you think there's a lack of callers compared to, say, 15 years ago?
Oh, it's not even close. There's
Yeah.
a huge lack of callers from 15 years ago. I mean, I remember, now this is going back a little bit further than that, but when I used to fill in for Joe in the mid 2000s, before I gave it up completely until everything happened with Craig, I remember I would fill in and you would have a good strong open at 1 a.m. Well, of course, 1 o'clock in the morning, but you come on at 1:05 after the update, and you'd be in the middle of whatever the topic of the day was. And it was never, for me, it was never everything. You would pick the topic of the day. And usually, and I worked with Joe, we would go to events, and that's completely lost around here. Now, Evan goes as a fan to the Nets and the, I mean, going with credentials, going in the locker room, sometimes doing interviews and tape for you, run it later in the show, but whatever. You do your open, you'd go to the flash at 1:20. That was still a thing. When you would come out at 1:05, 1:25, there were 8 calls up the entire night. Maybe in the 4 o'clock hour, they would drop off a little bit, but then at 5, they'd be right back there to finish up the show until you took it to the IMUS program at 5:30 or whatever. Now, I mean, I've done enough shows here in the morning, on the weekends. You look at that board, you look at that phone, you're almost like, do we got to call the phone company?
Is this working?
It is a big difference. Now, I do think part of that is exactly what you talk about. I think I look at kids like my older son, who's 20 years old, who does listen to this station a little bit for sure, but call it, not a chance. He'd be no problem tweeting at us. He ain't calling it. And I do know a lot of people watch us in the morning too, as opposed to listen. Why they don't call, I don't know. BT and Sal have no problem with the calls.
Yeah, I think some people think, "Oh, I'm gonna wait on hold forever," which is actually if you have a good point on a relevant topic that you're talking about. There's some people, Jerry, I sometimes can barely get
And we're going to them.
the guy on hold. Yeah, there's no wait.
Yep.
And then if you're calling about something we're not talking about and you're a decent caller, I'll put you on hold, but you might sit there for a while. But if you're calling on topic and you have something interesting or funny to say, it
Yeah.
goes right through. But we're still like the quality of the speaker phones in the cars, the Bluetooth is just
It's
still
terrible.
terrible.
I
I don't
agree.
understand why we haven't fixed that yet.
I know. Not great. Not
That's-
great. Why?
that's-
Because I'll tell you why. Because our voices are beaming up into space and coming right back down.
Oh,
It's a miracle that you can actually hear anything
I see.
on the other end.
Yeah.
Well, it's a different, and also I do think part of it too is when you look at what the medium has become, whether it's radio, YouTube is huge now with all the shows. Again, people call them podcasts. I call them shows on YouTube. They're all really guest based now. They're not taking phone calls. They're not asking for phone calls, or it's not two guys. A lot of cases, it's 3 and 4 guys sitting around a table like we are with 4 microphones, maybe in us, and just conversing. It's different when you got, I do like if I was in here for the full show, for instance, instead of just the one segment, I think it's a little bit easier to get through 4 hours than just 2. It's just another voice. If you were there with you, if you really were into the sports and everything, and you had an open mic, now all of a sudden 3 of us, and that's 4, and it becomes more of now it can be a little chaotic. I get that. I think it's easier to get through. That's what these shows and podcasts have become.
Yeah. Yeah. They're, especially like you said, the long form interview ones. And if they're not long form interviews, then there's multiple guys sitting there
Yes, 100%.
for long periods of time.
I mean, even look at the Nick one with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. They're there every game, every show with, and I forget his name, but they've got like a traffic cop host, which I think I'd be very good at that job too, in terms of just directing topics at people. He does a great job. There's always 3 of them there, and then they always pop on a guest for about a half hour as well. No problem getting through 3 hours. Like almost, I actually think sometimes I watch them think they've got more to give, but it's ending.
Yeah. Yeah, no one did that. And the other interesting, funny thing about radio too is, everybody's on YouTube and you're with podcasts. Like you're more than just a radio show.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny, we laugh at our YouTube numbers that are very poor,
Terrible
for this particular podcast. And I was also talking with Tom Izzo, the digital guy, who's in charge of I believe he's in charge of the YouTube channel, and he'll show me like, when you look at the YouTube videos that do well, it's NFL.
Right.
First and foremost. If you do Yankees or Mets, that's second best.
Okay.
Knicks would be third best. This radio station yesterday did a lot of coverage on Rory McIlroy.
Yeah.
Those videos are at the level our podcast videos are. Yeah.
Which is amazing. But you know what that tells me too, though? So what do you think the golf audience is? They did 19 million people watched it.
Yeah.
It's guys that are in their mid 50s and older. Guess what? They're not on
YouTube.
Correct.
Right. So this is what I'm saying. That's a great point. So when you're a company, a media company nowadays, you have to be everything. You're your radio, your TV, your YouTube, you're the podcast. People who watched golf, those people really exist and they're listening.
Yeah.
But they're not on YouTube.
Correct.
So do you sacrifice your YouTube numbers because those people are on the radio, or you also, how much we've done so much Shador Sanders Giant. How much more can you do?
Well, my question to you would be with that, and that's a good question for Izzo. If a Shador Sanders segment on YouTube goes up today, are the numbers going to be big on YouTube? I
believe so.
Right. So you're kind of answering your own question in that, and I've said this to you when we've argued, we're idiots, myself included. I sit here and do this for 4 or 5 hours. Now, today I didn't, but a lot of times I listen all the way in and I will listen all the way home. And I'll get home and be like, wow, I just consumed like 7 hours of our radio station, which to you is incomprehensible. And the only thing I come back to is because I've got a small brain that enjoys it. You know, the same way you enjoy the murder mysteries and the murder documentaries, this is it for me. And while we've talked about Shador Sanders 600 different ways, there's always 601. And for some reason, we continue to listen to it and watch it. I can't explain it. It can't be explained. It's just what it is.
Yeah, that's why I would think the morning after the draft of day one
Huge numbers,
should
right?
be crazy around here.
You would certainly think so.
Because the Giants are picking somebody at 3.
Yes.
And no matter who it is, people will yell that they didn't take this other person.
You are so right. They take Abdul Carter. A lot of people will love it. A lot of people will not like it.
Yeah.
You know, and that goes back to you just can't please everybody. It is what it is.
Right.
So, can I ask you a radio question?
Yes, I love radio questions.
We always talk about how one little, movement or decision can completely change and alter the course of life, essentially.
Yes.
Did you happen to see, I didn't read it or see it, but the headline to me tells me enough. And it was the Anthony Acumia sit down where he acknowledged in the headline, again, I didn't read it or see his comments, but the headline basically says he acknowledges how he and Opie did a bad job with Howard back in the day, that they should have worked all together and could have really created. Can you imagine if instead of those 3 battling or those 2 shows battling, that they, I don't want to say became one, but worked in a complementary type of, that radio station could still be going. Probably not, but you don't know.
And it's funny because in other parts of the country, they were on the same radio station. So WIP in Philadelphia had Howard in the morning, Opie in WBCN in Boston. There were a number of places, but to have them both in fact, I think the company wanted them on K-Rock and Howard would not allow it.
Right.
But yeah, they could have, instead of fighting with each other, but that was also part of what Opie and Anthony were doing, whereas they were the young punks coming up. And they did what Howard did. That was always the funny thing. Howard did that to Imus. And then when Howard was having it done to him, he made the company put the kibosh on them.
Interesting.
And I know because I was on the dump button a number of times, and you had to dump out of any Howard Stern reference.
Wow, no kidding.
Any Howard Stern reference. If Anthony even went, hoo, that was a Howard Stern impression that got dumped.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was funny because the guy who was doing the dump button before me was he was aware that all the Howard Stern references, but Anthony just started calling him Big Bird, and the guy had no idea and was letting it all fly.
Is that a reference?
Yeah. Well, Anthony just said he looked like Big Bird.
Oh, okay.
So then he just would call him Big Bird, and the guy on the dump button didn't know Big Bird was
him.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty funny.
Yeah. But yeah, if they were being business people, they could have said, we'll handle, they could have rolled out on all the Howard affiliates.
Because we were CBS Radio at that time still, right?
Infinity.
Oh, still Infinity?
I think Infinity, yeah.
Okay. The one thing I remember about the Opie and Anthony days, which we've talked about before, I listened to Imus. I didn't listen to Stern. I listened to Mike and Chris. I never made the switch to Opie and Anthony. There were some in that newsroom that did. I can tell you that. I won't mention names, but there were some that when they weren't in the newsroom, they were listening to Opie and Anthony, not Mike and Chris.
Yeah.
So I never got it, but I do remember Opie and Anthony beat the living crap out of them in the ratings for a little while.
Yeah, which is always funny because Mike will always say they were number one forever, and that's
not true.
There was a couple year period where
Opie, they were number 2,
and they weren't. And listen, Mike and the Mad Dog have the longevity.
Absolutely.
Opie and Anthony were, a rocket that went up, exploded, and fell back to earth.
Right.
They exploded themselves.
That show, you would have, if you listened to that show and you had the mentality you have now, you might drive a car into a tree.
What do you mean?
You want to talk about being repetitive and doing topics and having guests.
Oh, Mike and the Mad Dog.
It's everything that you in 2025 despise about sports radio. Despise about it. And that's what that show was.
The other weird thing, too, with sports radio now that I miss from it is, like, if I were to hear right now that BT and Sal, if they said, hey, we're not happy with each other, we're going to address this at 11, my ass would be there at 11.
Yeah.
Now I'll be like, oh, you know what? I'll listen on my way in tomorrow on the podcast.
Because you can.
Because I can.
Yeah. Like back in the day, there was no rewinding.
No. Yeah. If you didn't hear it, you didn't hear it.
Yeah. It was gone.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
And there are some times I missed that part of it.
Yeah.
But I also felt like, when I worked with Ron and Fez in particular, they did such creative things on the air, and it was gone and not replayed and
That's interesting.
not archived anywhere.
So you guys didn't so at FAN, I remember if we recorded everything, but a lot got recorded on a VHS tape. You're going to tell me there was no recording system
We
over
would
there?
record on a digital audio tape,
Okay.
the DAT machine, but it was only to be used for sometimes they did weekend best of. And then because the radio is so cheap, we would just record over the same DAT tape for the next week.
We did the same thing with the VHS tapes.
Well, that's what Howard talks about. Howard said when he first got to K-Rock, he was taping his shows on the VHS, and then he found out they were bulk erasing them for the next week. He's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, at FAN, we only had 4 that went, I believe, for 6 hours each. They went midnight to 6, and that was one of the biggest things you had to learn when you were in the control room. You have to make sure that these things, they were on auto, but if you didn't see the red light, you had to make sure that they were recording. And then you'd have to, if there was no incident or you'd rewind it and get it set for the next day.
Right.
It was just re-record. That's why when people will reference that tapes didn't exist or don't exist, they don't.
Right.
They did in the moment we had stuff, but 24 hours later, it was gone, just the way it was.
Yeah, and I know there's a bunch of Ron and Fez and Opie and Anthony stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I know I have a bunch of stuff at home, which I have on CD.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was recording, if I was saving the shows. I don't remember.
I have all of, when Matthew was born, all of his announcements from the station.
Oh, that's cool.
I did save that. There's not much I saved on CD. I saved those. Steve Summers, Steve and Bob Usler announced it at first, which was really cool. I saved the announcements, which was very neat, and I announced when Imus mentioned me for the first time. I thought that was for me,
absolutely,
it was the coolest thing. Other than that, I don't have a lot.
Yeah.
I think I had my first update, April 2nd, 2000 was my first midnight update on a Saturday night. I have that on a cassette tape somewhere. Where I would play it now, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I do have that somewhere.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Then at some point, it becomes would have too much tape on yourself.
Correct.
So what are you doing with
John Minko keeps every basketball game he announces? Everyone. I have 0.
That'll be for the John Minko Museum that we open up someday.
That's exactly right. Pretty good.
All right, Jerry, let's do the warm-up show. We'll be back here tomorrow on a Wednesday. See ya!